this whole topic of World War I, World War II that James brings up on a regular basis, I really feel that these two wars are intertwined. And one of the reasons I became convinced of this, Johnson, was because of the words of Harry Browne.
Right.
Do you have a little excerpt from a Harry Browne essay here?
I had it. It's there's an article by Harry Browne about World War II called "The Ignorance of History is No Excuse." And unfortunately, Harry Browne's website currently is down, which, unfortunately...
Oh, it crashed on you?
Well, no. I've got access to it, actually. You can get access to his articles because they're all text via the Google Cache. So I have access to his article. And essentially, he's written a bunch of articles talking about World War II and specifically how entwined it was in with World War I, and how, hey, maybe if politicians had minded their own business in 1917 instead of plunging America into a war that didn't threaten us, an armistice would have occurred, and the existing governments in Russia and Germany most likely would have remained in power, meaning that there would be no Soviet Union, there would be no Hitler, and of course, there are always people who think that they're do-gooders and they believe that they know what's best for the world, and they claim that some simple little act of force will settle matters once and for all. And, of course, it never does.
I wouldn't say it never. I think that James has rightly pointed out that, the United States' use of force in World War II, essentially Japan stopped its imperialistic wishes and went on to be an incredible powerhouse as far as manufacturing and now, the creation of technology and that kind of thing. It's an amazing place. They really changed their tune after World War II. They were just as imperialistic and even more so in many ways than the other.
But again, if you take into account, for example, if you think into account, of domino effect here, if there's no Soviet Union, maybe we wouldn't have some of the stuff that's going on in the Middle East. If
I think that's
Russia's government had remained in power.
Sure.
So, there's domino effects.
Absolutely. I'm certainly not going to argue the United States belonged in World War I. It was the largest mistake in U.S. history. As far as like a single decision goes, obviously, the way that the U.S. dealt with Native Americans and that sort of thing, terrible situation. Lots of terrible things that happened in U.S. history. But as far as one decision, the decision to go into World War I was a bad one, a very bad one, and it had a lot of ramifications. And I think we have to look at it in whole as opposed to in part. Yes, the United States managed to crush the ambitions of Nazi Germany and imperialistic Japan, but it gave power to Joseph Stalin in the process.
Right.
Stalin became very empowered by the results of World War II and killed millions more people than Hitler did.
Well, I think Harry Browne makes some interesting arguments. I mean, he says, like, if the U.S. had stayed out of World War I, there probably never would have been a World War II.
No Hitler.
No Hitler. I mean, if the Allies hadn't imposed draconian peace terms on Germany in 1918, there probably would have been no Hitler to threaten anyone. Germany would have resumed its role as an intellectual and cultural center in Europe. American diplomats apparently learned their lesson and eased their demands somewhat at the end of World War II. The Allies forced the Germans to promise things that could never be delivered, and using force to exact promises from someone like Saddam Hussein creates about as much security as ordering your cat to guard your home. If the demands are unnatural, as expecting a country in the Middle East to disarm certainly is, you can expect a backlash. And he goes on to say there will always be thugs like Hitler, like Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein in the world, but those thugs aren't dangerous to us until we create real grievances that cause millions of people to start supporting the thugs with money, networking, and connections that will allow the thugs to threaten us. I mean, he goes on, and it's a very good article. I mean, he talks about, people who are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat it.
Right. I think that most people in the world just don't spend that much time with rational thought. And so therefore they can be swayed by ideas like, the great Satan, they're terrible because of their, the Coca-Cola and Britney Spears and whatever. And absolutely. There are people in the Middle East, mullahs and whatever, these radical types that say these things. But when they also say what their list of grievances really is about is the United States being involved in their country's governance, supporting kings in Saudi Arabia, supporting dictators in Yemen, around the Middle East. That's what their grievance is. There's United States support for Israel. And, Israel, it's a tough situation. If the United States, here's another if the United States, if Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the bigoted SOB that he was, would have let the Jews come from Germany into the United States, how much better off would we be? Take a look at how advanced Israel is right now compared to the countries around it. Basically, it was brought to where it was in the course of a few decades because those Jews wanted it to be that way. Awesome. Excellent. Why didn't we let them here? And then they wouldn't have had to spend all that extra energy defending themselves, all the money that goes into that, and it would have been more brain power into more innovations and more wonderful things. But no, we're run by bigots. People defend bigots, and I'm supposed to somehow not call it bigotry when it's bigotry.
Well, the United States might be much better entertained and funnier. I look at like all the Jewish entertainers and Jewish folks in comedy, and
imagine if there's another Mel Brooks.
Yeah,
for God's sakes, wouldn't that be awesome?
Or another, like folks like Einstein and folks like
well, Einstein came to the country, but no doubt about it. I think that this is it's sad to see people defending violence in all these situations. I think it's difficult when I see Israel defending quote unquote defending itself against the Palestinians. I see, well, look, in this last episode against the Palestinians, there have been 6 times as many Palestinians killed in that situation as Israelis killed since in decades. Well, that's a disproportionate outcome, and there's no doubt about that.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.